afternoon to you all, and I am glad that we are meeting once again on this beautiful Tuesday. It's been raining, so I'm hoping that it's not raining where you are, but also if it's raining where you are, I hope you don't live in a swamp. Because if you live in a swamp, the chances that your road has been washed away are quite high. But that is probably one of the reasons as to why we host this show, to discuss issues of governance, but also issues that are pertinent to us as citizens of this country. Joining me on the panel today is Maria Alesi, who you also know to moderate the show once in a while. And also joining me on the show is Tricia, Gloria, and Nabaye, who also occasionally moderates the show. This is the first time that we have an all-moderator panel.
Yeah.
And so before we delve into the stories that made up the week, I'm just going to ask the two of them to tell us how this journey has been. I know that, yeah, you didn't prep for that, but yes, how has this journey been? Yeah, working on the women's show and why you actually chose to do it. I'll also answer in my humility.
Yes. It's been an interesting and learning journey. I think sometimes you take information, content, and research for granted, right?
Yes.
Being able to know the things that are important for you to be part of a conversation like this. Why did I join this show as a curtain raiser?
Yes.
I joined this show as a curtain raiser. It's an inside joke, guys.
Yes.
I joined this show as a curtain raiser because I think there always needs to be space for women to have conversations about like politics, economics, and social issues. The only time you find panels where women are talking about these things is either Women's Day or something like some. Then the rest of the year they tell you they are unqualified to be able to contribute to conversation.
I know.
Yes, so that's why I joined this.
Okay. Yes.
I didn't join as a curtain raiser, but I think for me it's been growing.
Yeah.
You know, you grow in what you know, you grow in how you articulate different issues, but most importantly, you also meet people that speak a different mind than you do. It's very easy to bubble yourself in your thoughts, in what you know, in my truth, but to see the diversity in opinion, but then also to learn. I didn't set out to be a moderator, but it was a space I loved to take on, learn from, and then also grow and expand into.
Yes.
That has been for me this journey.
Great. I joined because it was an interesting space to be part of, but also I've been part of. I think all of us have been on shows, both on TV and radio, and there's always that uncomfortable time when you're on either of those shows when they say, as a woman,
Yes.
and then you roll your eyes and you're like, can't I just be on this show in my capacity as me, as a citizen of the Republic of Uganda? And so this was one of the shows where I was very sure I would never have to hear as a woman.
As if you can speak for all the women.
You get, you know.
Yes.
And so yes, and so it's been a great journey so far, and I'm glad that we are having an all moderator panel. But delving straight into the week, and I know this week has been heavy with climate change. It's been heavy with the Ethiopian crisis, which we shall not go into. But also one of the conversations that has dominated discussion both online, but also within the mainstream media space is the issue of manels. You know, I think it started with NBS, and NBS has just decided to they've become experts at holding manels, and I know that Winnie Byanyima called them out.
Yes.
And as usual, the standard response was, we can't find women. You know, that is what every television station and TV station seem to say. And then also FDC held the time up, the red card front also had a conversation, and it had a panel full of testosterone, you know. And so opening up our conversation, let's talk about manels and all the reasons that are given for us not to have balanced panels, and if those reasons are even justified. Maria.
So one, I think so manels are just basically a reflection of society in general, right?
Yeah.
Because if, for example, you look at, and it's not, it didn't start yesterday, and Winnie Byanyima, of course, calling them out was really just part of a conversation that has been driven for a very long time, especially by young feminists who do a lot of advocacy on the internet. Of course, you know that there are the Thursday shows, then there's, I think it's a Friday show. They're basically
Sunday
always,
one,
and then Saturday morning political shows on radio. Because sometimes we only focus on the TV people because they're the ones who are going to later poster out, but you also have a lot of manuals happening on radio every single day, because radios have political talk shows every day, I think, except for Sunday. So one of the things that's usually said is that women, it's difficult for them to find qualified women to be on these manuals. But I think the question we must be answering, and that's why we must also ensure that we never have manuals, is the question of why. If you have a conversation, I'll use the example of NBS because I think they've been called out so many times. They have become completely adamant, so much so that
they're so defensive. You know, they're so defensive.
So that show has men who are between 40 and 60 years on Thursday evening. And what happens on that show is that, so they don't have qualified women because these are men in their 40s, 50s, and sometimes 60s. The thing they need to be asking themselves before they start even having conversations on women who are either qualified or not qualified is, where are the women who are these people's peers in their age group? Where were they when these men were making the necessary career steps to be able to be the experts, right? And we'll discuss the framing of experts, framing of conversations later as to why we end up with manuals. So many of these people's peers didn't have the opportunity to go to school the way that they went to school. Many of them had to take a break in their career or couldn't even go ahead in their career because they had to juggle again what society has left as women's role, raising their children. Because none of those men has to think twice about who's going to look after their kids in case they have to be on a 10 p.m. show, right? But also just the fact that these men have often postured themselves as revolutionaries, as people who are interested in equality, and then they show up on manuals by themselves and do not even hold themselves accountable, right? So they want women's labor for when they want votes, when their political party is recruiting and things like that, but they will never give up the necessary space for women to actually be in these spaces. And so for me, it's one, the fact that men will never hold themselves accountable. Like, we've been shouting about manuals for 4 years, but you sit there as a collective, feel no shame completely
that you're on a manual.
And then come and tell us how your political party or your organization is trying to create a better world. What better world when 50% of the population is not on your panel? So someone once asked me, if Maria, you're a proponent of women just being on panels because women. I'm like, yes, I am a proponent of women just being, because why were we excluded? Nobody asked us if we were clever. Nobody asked us if we were going to be experts.
If we wanted to go to school.
There was no silver cabal they spoke into and said, can women be experts? And the spirit said no, right? So if we were just excluded because we are women, we must be included on that very same particular standard. Me, I'm not trying anything.
You're not trying to even argue it out. That
not qualification, nothing.
But also on the aspect of qualification, and I hear you on. I won't even try. They should just put us there. But also on the issue of qualification, does anyone ever ask if these men are actually qualified enough to sit on these panels, and who measures qualification of who sits on these panels? Because at times they just collect them. At times what happens with media houses is they'll make a phone call to you at 4 p.m. and say, are you available? So is the qualification your availability to appear at 6 p.m. 2 hours later, or is the qualification your ability to have a conversation on the subject?
Laughs at me.
Because that is what I was going to say. Sometimes they are not even qualified to be. So who qualifies? Sometimes they're not even qualified to be in these spaces. You sit on a panel with someone and they're like, is that how your brain works? But because they are men and they've been invited, you're like, so you all occupy the space virtue of the fact that you're a man. You don't even need to bring anything to this table. You just have to open your mouth. So that is a narrative. Who qualifies? Because I know there have been people they've invited to these spaces, men in their testosterone, and they show up and you're like,
How did you end up on the
Listen, they are
Did you
qualified
end
in the
up in
circle
the-
of men.
How did you qualify? But I hear you when you say we then should be able to invite women to this place, as virtue of the fact that they are women, because that was the measure they used to disqualify them. And you'll be very shocked that even in our little wisdom or in our big wisdom, there are a lot of things women don't speak to, but if you sat down to speak to one woman, you'll be very excited with the insights that they carry, but they don't have that platform. So who qualifies? The system is already made. I mean, media houses are owned by men. The production team will be male. You have one woman anchor somewhere there.
And then they boast and say, but there's one woman on the technical team. Like,
so they will say, oh, mainstream news has women. Most of our anchors are women. The most serving people in media are women. But the numbers don't make sense if there are voices that are still stifled, even in general opinion conversations. Because I don't know if how you're calling baby cool to a COVID-19 conversation, and you don't call a nurse, a certified qualified nurse, to talk about the issues that are happening. How are you qualifying baby cool to know things about, health care, just virtue of the fact that he's a man and he has a voice? And you're not qualifying a nurse who lives with it on a daily, who is at the front line, who is doing these things. So it's a question of who holds the power in these places, and then who qualifies this power, because you're qualifying a very unqualified. I want to believe that he's very unqualified, and you're leaving, experts, quote unquote, people that have the voice and are able to articulate these issues just because they are women. So that is a critical part. Is it that in the fault of being a woman, we've decided to exclude, and even there are women who are producers to these shows who downright tell you they didn't find a woman. And they're women themselves. So as much as these spaces have men in them, we also need to deal with the issue that how are women in these spaces also fronting fellow women? That is a question that is there. But I've spoken of that, especially for the NBS issue. When Winnie Banyina spoke about it, someone said, and I'll quote verbatim, they are scared, they're in self-preservation. So they're scared of, losing what they have, losing their family, being choked from their jobs, being taken out of their, I'll whisper later.
Okay.
Who they'll be taken out of their rentals. Hold yourself.
Wait. So wait. That it's the women who are scared.
Yes,
For all these things.
Yes, it's the women that are scared of all these things. That they're scared of the witch hunt that comes with being at the front line and talking. And I was shocked because is that how we are going to exclude women because we've presumed that every other woman is scared of these spaces? There are women willing to take these spaces. Have you asked? Have you called? Have you sought them out?
So I know that one of the people who was very vocal was who was it? And now his name has disappeared. Maybe the Lord wants to protect him, his identity. But
Thank you.
Yes,
I think the Lord is protecting you, not
protecting me. Yes, but I think he was an NBS, an NTV presenter, and he was saying, "Give us the names," and he went on and on around the "give us the names," angle. And yet I know that within the women's movement, this "give us the names" argument isn't the first time that this is coming up. I know that about 2 years ago, we had this same conversation with Kenneth Anderson Lukwago because of manels on Radio 1. And he said, give us the names. And we gave names. I know we've given names to NTV. And yet these names, even the submission of these names hasn't been able to change, to change the context. And so one of the things also that producers say is that women are not willing to be on those shows. And so as feminists on this platform, knowing the gender roles that Maria talked about, how could we advise, or how would we inform media houses to be able to craft programming in a manner that allows for women to actually be included?
Okay, let me start by not answering the question that you've asked. So Tricia said something about women being afraid to be there or to
Yeah.
be in these spaces. And I think rightfully so, because you see, we live in a very violent world, and this violence is directed specifically at
Towards
women,
women,
right?
yes.
It's the way media houses expect women to look to be on these television shows. It's the way newspapers, or even what happens on social media, if you show up on TV, people start to critique everything else except the things that you've actually said, your expertise. And even if I say something foolish as a woman, people start to insult everything else about me, whether it's my children, my body, like it's a whole load of things, right? And so for me, I think it's rightfully so. I think women should be afraid to be on TV because why would I voluntarily put myself in the way of this kind of violence? And this person who said that thing must also understand that this violence is curated by men, right? So men use this kind of violence to harm women in public spaces so that they leave them, so that they push them out of these public spaces, especially if they speak things that are not comfortable to the power and peace of men, quote unquote peace of men, right? Because they are concerned about how women speak to them or how women speak about them as men. So yes, rightfully so. But to answer your question on curating of spaces, I personally have been asked for lists. There was a time when I was deeply enthusiastic about it, and I'd be like, oh, I'm looking for women in economics, I'm looking for women in agriculture, but I have stopped doing that, right? Because one, if you place yourself, if you posture yourself as a media house that's interested in the lives of people, you must be able to do this work. If you have decided that you're going to be an authority on a certain matter, you must be an authority fully on issues of inequality, because issues of inequality are the very core foundation of every other conversation we can have as a collective. So it breaks my heart, or it's disgusting. I think that's the right word. I think breaking heart is really a wrong phrase. It's disgusting that media personalities who pretend to be the most connected people in the world cannot find a single man talk about economics.
But they find many on Women's Day.
Yes, thank you. On Women's Day, there's
and the day of the African child,
yes,
there's the day of nutrition,
exactly.
We have enough women to talk about this.
So for me, that is lazy. I also refuse to be on panels, on manos. I refuse to turn a mano into a panel when someone says, hey, now that you've complained, you come and be on the panel.
But that's
must
emotional
I
blackmail.
first quarrel for you to actually think that
True.
representation is very important? Because we've had this conversation for the very longest time. But also when people say that women are refusing, I think we must also think about looking at statistics. I like that men usually say, oh, rational, logical, gender, facts, what? Look at the figures. Do the figures actually speak to the supposed facts that you are placing? They are saying, no, women are refusing. But how many women are we talking about? To whether the programming can get better, to answer your question, Bella, I think one, the framing of discussions. I was going to talk about earlier the framing of expert on issues. You see, expert has been turned into some theory-based office-holding person. But there are people who have experiences on the matter. When we're discussing economics, why is it that economics has been left as a conversation to economists at MOBS, at Makerere University, at what? A woman in the market
speaks more economics.
Yes, she's experiencing economics
every day.
at its, yes, so she's an expert of that lived reality. So if we cannot frame conversations in such a way that people with lived realities can fit into that discussion, then we're not doing what we're supposed to do. Because of course they're going to complain about things like English, what. But listen, these things can be translated, right? If you can make time to find out what's in the Chinese news, which is read in a Mandarin or some other Chinese language, please don't exhaust me with your small matters of language. But also I think timing, there are things that media houses know, like me, I'm tired of telling them. So I've decided I'm going to devote my entire life to calling them out, because I don't have time to help them because they are paid. If they feel like this job is so hard, let them resign. Someone will do it. NBS won't collapse because one host of one show said he resigned because the feminists were complaining. Please resign. Actually, that's our joy. Yes.
And maybe what you're saying, and it's something that the narrative that we need to create around conversations is that you really don't have to have all your conversations in English, because you could speak in it and someone can translate it at the bottom of the line. So any other person that wants to join this conversation will actually understand what you're saying. But then I also hear you on the fact that the narrative of experts we've created, and I think it's a lot in the media spaces, that it is only these expert people that should be able to have a say in these things. If it's money, please call professor, someone at MOOC, they'll be able to do that. But it speaks also to what we've thought news to be. I mean, you will watch CNN and see they have experts on this, experts on digital security, on what. And so you'll have a framing that even in our very prime news and in every other thing that we have, we need to bring someone that is at that level. Yes, they are okay to have. But your reality is that you live in a low-income country. So the experiences that are going to...
Impoverished.
A low-income country.
Yes.
Ignore her.
A low-income country, but the reality is some of the experiences that you're going to have are going to come from the bottom, and not from the top. The top really doesn't speak for the regular person. Pick up people from the bottom that can be able to articulate issues for you to be able to relate with the everyday man. I do not understand taxes the way a professor understands them. Yes, I may want to know that knowledge, but I understand that the price of tomatoes will increase between September to November.
Yes.
Please bring someone in the markets to help me understand that. So that is a reality we have, that we copy and paste what we see in, media elsewhere and want to translate it for ourselves here as well.
Yes, and just speaking to that, like, copying, right? Because you see, the other thing about like also the media, the other side, it still has manuals, and it also like has white manuals. So
black people might as well be shouting Black Lives Matter.
And somehow also like black men in a country like Uganda seem to understand racism, but they fail to
understand this inequality between men and women.
Exactly, right? They understand the NRM excluding them and punishing them and what. But somehow when they translate that violence onto women, they forget, right?
Sense.
So for me, that
makes sense.
It's that
failure to understand and to link.
And these are people with access to information. Let's have these debates with people who have not gone to school, don't have access to internet, but you're on the internet all the time.
Yes. But also maybe it's for us, because I know that the three of us had a conversation this week about the silence of men who are invited to panels, and some of them were saying, but it's not my job as an organizer to tell the panel, to tell the panel. But here is the thing: if you're a man and you're invited on a panel, all the three of us, I can speak for all of us. Every time we are invited to the panel, one of the first questions we ask is who else is on the panel?
Yes.
And we don't ask that so that we can say, I don't like sitting next to so and so on the panel. No, it's basically to address the issue of inclusion.
True.
I know that a few weeks ago we had a conversation around a panel that was discussing diversified beauty, but the beauties on the poster were all conventionally beautiful women. And so that was problematic. And as we speak right now, the panel looks more inclusive in terms and diversified in terms of beauty. And so if you're the sort of person who has the privilege of being called to panels, you must be able to use your privilege and power to ask, who else will be on the panel? And if you're a man and the list that you're given doesn't have any woman, you must be able to use your power and privilege to say, I will not sit on that panel because it's not inclusive,
Yes, especially if you posture yourself as revolutionary,
progressive.
Changing the world. No, please.
No. I'll give you an example of one time there was a panel that was supposed to happen, and a lady was supposed to moderate it. Last minute she had an emergency and then she had to be taken off. So it became a full-blown manner. And a gentleman who fronts as, I'm gender equal and I love these things, said, oh, thank God we've escaped a kindergarten conversation.
What?
I was like, did I hear well? And so such it's said in passing, but it speaks a lot to what is happening in these spaces and why we still have, and these days it's even adamant, you adamantly have a manual and you're not even worried for the inclusion.
You actually have responses of people who call you out. And very arrogant responses. What happened to we are sorry? Okay, pretend you're sorry. These adamant responses.
I'm not for over-regulation, but I think we must get to a point where we also demand that UCC does not allow television stations and radio stations to just air manuals. No.
Especially if we are a country that that purports to be progressive on issues of gender.
No,
And with women,
If we're
in
looking
it,
at gender
Yes.
certification, what are the gender guidelines
Yeah.
and minimum standards that UCC uses on media
Yes,
houses? I
on
think those are
media
some of the
houses.
conversations
Yeah.
Yes,
that we
I
should
think
be
we
having,
must
because this
have it.
blatant abuse is
Because
just
we've tried,
wrong.
Bambi, we've talked, we've
We have.
negotiated, we've volunteered.
Yes, but that notwithstanding, despite the fear and the violence that Maria talked about earlier, I would like to encourage every woman who is listening in, should you be invited to go to a media platform,
Yeah.
and you can, let fear not be the reason you say no, okay? And let your experience, or I don't know what, not be the reason you turn down these opportunities. I think it's important that we have more women sitting on panels, more
taking
women
up
discussing
spaces.
issues of governance, and more of us taking up these spaces. Those men are not as brilliant as we
Nabaye is
make
on
them
now.
to be, as brilliant as we make them to be. So I hope
Yes.
that we can call out manuals, but we can also make time to sit on some of these panels as women. But moving on to a more related conversation.
Yeah.
On the 11th of this week, of this month, which is this week, on Thursday, there's a conversation by the Rotary Club of Chitante. And Dr. Maggie Chigozi will be talking about Boys Matter too. And so we've just come off a historical, why do we have panels that look like this? And when I saw this, it's not our regular news, but we know that, for example, the Archbishop of Uganda has previously talked about spending his time as Archbishop investing in the boy child because he has been left behind. And we also have a lot of male engaged, champions who are saying that, oh, the boy child has been left behind. Let's talk about this boy child who has been left behind. And what are the realities of being left behind? Because it seems that we are having a growing movement of Ugandans who feel like the girl child and the women have arrived, and suddenly the boy is suffering.
I've even heard of people that want to remove the affirmative, and they feel like the affirmative action has lived its time and it has, achieved its need. It should be taken off.
Yes.
But you know how they say the story will always glorify the hunters if the lions don't learn how to write.
Yes.
It is a narrative of the hunter deciding that this conversation shall go this way instead of that way. So continuously we'll find ourselves at the Day of the Girl Child, where we are still talking about the boy child. We'll find ourselves on the Day of the African Girl, where we talk about the African boy.
On Women's Day.
On Women's Day, and unfortunately, there will be women peddling this. So it will speak to also women being, kakundi in this. It's a timing of things, because it has been continuous. This whole year I've had the boy child. And I'm imagining, what about the boy child that are we missing? But if you look at our statistics, how many girls actually make it to the end of school?
Let's just look at COVID.
Let's look at COVID. I mean, the boy child will be able to go back into school and, maybe pick up the pieces of where they are, but there'll be girls that won't be able to return to school. There'll be girls that are now mothers that, have the responsibility of being mothers before they're even, and their children, before they're even children. And so the stakes against the girl child continue to, escalate out of proportion. And yet the boy child is still something people want to, I don't know if it's a money thing, but still people want to front over it. But it's also a power thing. That's the way power has been structured, the invisible way of, a woman won't thrive as long as the men are
uncomfortable.
Yes, as long as they're uncomfortable, the women will always have to have a story to be at. We are sorry, this is making you uncomfortable. It's a Day of a Girl Child, but lo and behold, it has now become a boy child issue. So it's not that they are not having the things. It's just that they are choosing to ignore the realities of, the different power structures that are happening within systems, and, the unfair way life has been for a girl child. I really don't think anything has changed.
And the unfairness hasn't gone away, like
no,
you've
it hasn't.
said. If anything, it has just morphed.
Yeah.
But it's very much present. But yes.
No way. Okay, so what about boy child matters? Two boys are being left behind. Left out of what? For me is usually the question.
Yeah.
What exactly is it that you're making reference to? Because if you as, and again, I will stick to people who have access to information, because I don't want to lump people in the same group, right?
Group.
When someone like Dr. Maggie Chigozi or Dr. Ruth Acheng or Dr.
or the bishop,
or the
Archbishop.
Archbishop, or unfortunately I have to say his name from my mouth, Martin Semper, and people like that, right? Say things like the boy child is being left behind. What are they making reference to? For me is always the question, right? So, because if you understand the history of why there has been a lot of work around women and men, women and girls, you will understand that we are not having a regular conversation.
Yeah.
Like we talked about earlier, why were girls excluded? Because they were girls. Why were women excluded? Because they were women. Then you go to what were they excluded from? They were excluded from public spheres, right? So it's education, it's the framing of employment, like, because employment was framed in a certain way, so women couldn't access that employment. Small things like being able to write. Like if I wanted to author a book, we know historically some women had to use names of men to be able to author books.
But even getting a bank account.
Yes, even a bank account, even for a long time, even today, for you to access contraception as a woman in many of the health facilities, is that you must be able to do what? You must be able to prove that a man or your husband needs to endorse you. Or if I went and I wanted to cut my tubes because I don't have children, the first thing someone is going to tell me is, what if a man comes into your life and things like that, right? Like, he could stay in his life. Why does he have to come into mine? So when we start looking at, like you said, the facts, the statistics, if you look at primary school enrollment, yes, primary school enrollment has changed for girls vis-a-vis boys, because now you have, before COVID, you had more enrollment for girls than boys in primary school. True. That number flips when you go to secondary school. It flips even more when you cross over, right?
Yes.
So, and when you look at, and I welcome all these people to actually read statistics and documents from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, because there is information on the website. So when you look there, you'll see that the reasons why girls vis-a-vis boys dropped out of school are literally the same, except for teenage pregnancy and early marriages, right? Because those are the things that affect girls. And all the work around education for girls is around issues of teenage pregnancy, it's around menstrual health, and it's about early marriage.
Yes.
Boys and girls are dropping out of school because of poverty. So poverty is a bigger problem we must be solving, right?
And
as
what
opposed
about,
to what about boys, right?
Yes.
So, and the saddest bit about this entire what about the boy child is that these people are not actually interested in the lives of boys and men, because if they were interested in the lives and boys of lives of boys and men, they would be addressing the structural issues that affect men, yes, disproportionately. So we're looking at things of the naming and framing of crime, for example, the incarceration numbers. Like, those are things they would be looking at. The fact that violence against men is thrown under the bus and things like that, because it's men who laugh at each other when they experience violence, right? But the only time these conversations come out, and it's completely a shame that Dr. Maggie Chigozi, who is the board chair of a feminist organization, is having this conversation in the middle of 16 days of activism against violence against women and girls. Because the only time these conversations come up is when women are addressing the injustices that have faced them. Yes. Then they say, what about the boy child? We're talking about deferment. Statistically, again, ideological gender and what statistically, the victims of sexual violence are disproportionately women, right? These people should be talking about violence against men in workplaces, right? Like, and so for me, that's the part that confuses me. But the sad thing is that they are not actually interested, because they would be challenging capitalism, right? As a form of economics. They would be challenging access to healthcare. They'll be challenging a justice system that's not working and that's not delivering for people, because men are predominantly the victims of crime, right? So what are we talking about? Because what is it that women are asking for that men have never had access to? We're asking for access to education. We're asking for fair rights in marriage.
Which are human rights.
Human rights.
We're asking for a life free of violence. We're asking for to be able to earn the same amount of
As
money
men.
for
As
people
the
working
boy
the
child,
same job. We're
yes.
asking for the work that we do to be recognized and paid
Mm.
fairly. Like, these are the things that we're asking, that girls don't get raped by big men and made pregnant and then they have to get out
To
of
get
school,
out of
right?
school.
So explain to me what
What
it
the
is
boy
that
child
boys
needs.
are missing out on in relation to the historical analysis of why the women's rights and feminist movement
Are
actually
pushed
came
for.
to life.
Yeah.
On top of that, feminists have even done the unfortunate work of documenting how violence affects men,
Yeah.
right? They have spoken of issues of racism,
Yes.
incarceration. Feminists are
crime.
the leaders of the abolitionist movement that says that the prison system, policing system is
It's
not
deeply
working.
problematic and it's not-
Exactly.
yes.
So me, I think that's a conversation, and it's unfortunate. Again, people with access to information are the ones headlining this kind of rubbish,
conversations,
because it's
yeah.
complete, utter rubbish in my world. I'm not saying that men's lives don't matter. They do, but
What is the context
What's
of
the
matter that
context
we
of
are
matter?
having this?
exactly, because
Yes.
if when Bella says I've had a long day and I stand up and say you think my day was any worse,
Shorter.
then it misses the point of
Yes.
everything. Yeah. So we
You
can
know.
do better, and like I would encourage people, just read. The
Yes.
statistics will disprove you any day, anytime. The statistics will also show you the actual things you should be speaking to.
About.
Yes.
Which we refuse to talk
Which we
about,
refuse
by
to
the
talk
way.
about.
We refuse to talk about. So again, if the boy child has issues, I'm not sure that it has anything to do
With
with
being
the
left
girls,
out.
with the women's
Child,
rights
yes.
movement. I don't think it has anything to do with justice and fairness and equity. It has nothing to do with that. And I think if we choose to ask what about the boy child, it should be done in a totally independent context of the struggle for
Of the-
equality
for the
for
boy
women and
child.
girls.
Yes.
Otherwise, we just bastardize the entire conversation. So for everyone who is asking what about the boy child, may you just remember some of these submissions, just in case you decide to
been
go out
It
and
tired.
get
reminds me
and
of the
embarrass
Black Lives
yourselves.
Matter and then the All Lives Matter
You know,
narrative.
you know.
It's exactly that.
I'm sorry. Yes.
This is not an attack on
on anyone, but just saying.
Yes, but then also during the course of this week, on Monday last week, I think that was after we did our show. Schools opened. They opened this week. They opened last week. They opened last Monday.
No,
Higher
today universities
education.
are
Today universities are
Yes,
opening.
and then other institutions are set for January.
Yes, and so institutions are opening. Yes, there are standard operating procedures that have been issued. Are we? And I know we've been closed for 2 years. I know we must open as a country. Are we doing the bare minimum to ensure safety, even as we open?
We are bare minimum. So bare minimum, no. I think one. So yes, schools must open. I think
They
they must
must, yes,
open. I
yes.
think I've come to a place in my life where I'm saying, like, whatever the circumstances,
Schools
let's
must
open.
open.
Let's just pick each piece as we go.
Yes.
But we have arrived at this point because the state has shown that it is incompetent consistently ever since the pandemic broke in 2020. We have shown that we are completely incompetent, and we're also thieves, right? We are not just thieves of money, but we are thieves of people's lives. Because there is a whole set of children, and this happens predominantly because public servants are not forced to participate. Their children are not forced to participate in consumption of public goods. Yes.
Yeah.
Schools would never have been closed if the one minister of water,
any of them,
his child was going to
that,
Chitante Primary School.
True.
Or if they were going to
Uganda,
Yes.
CU Primary
Yes, all
School.
of them. Like, if they were forced to attend, then they would, if their children were forced to attend those institutions, then we would never have had this problem. The other problem on the table is the fact that, for me, the thing that shocked me, right, is that in 2 years, the Ministry of Education did not on any day innovate alternative ways for schooling to happen.
happen.
They literally left this entire education system to Inshallah and the God of Isaac,
Vibes.
Jacob, and Abraham. Yes, right?
She said that.
Yes.
But she's a believer.
Yes,
She
because
God's
by
messenger.
now, okay, in understanding our reality, right? Because also there's the fact that, okay, now it becomes difficult. Say Uganda doesn't have money because you say this, and then they bought 4 locomotives that can't move, and we lost 48 billion, right? So it becomes difficult. Say we don't have money. But the thing that for me surprised me is that we didn't use this time to rethink, for example, schooling.
Yeah.
Because by now, in a bid to control the spread of COVID and be able to do contact tracing, we must have like a zonal form of education.
Yeah.
Of course, the thing about that means that we're going to be concerned about the education, the quality of schools within our communities.
True.
Because if all of a sudden now you know that you can't come from Buate to take your child to Kampala parents, you'll be concerned about the school in Buate. It improves security because now all of a sudden parents will know that being in my gate, yes, is enough, but my child has to go through this process. Yes, so that would have improved contact tracing. That would have reduced the amount of money we have to spend on schooling, right? But aside from that, it's also the fact that, like, for all these years, we even got a loan and it didn't go into improving the quality, the physical learning spaces, right? So for me, I don't think we're even trying. I think now we are. We must open the schools. Like, there's no debate about that because guys,
everyone else has opened and is looking at us with
77 months later, we are coming to the 78th month. We have not weeks. Yes, weeks, and our schools are still closed. But in terms of whether we are doing one day, because a lot of schools have closed because they can't afford to open. Where are those children supposed to go? Because if we're going to say social distancing, keeping space, that means that the other school that closed, the people have to go somewhere else. Fees hiking is going to be a thing.
Oh,
I know
but
a
didn't
school,
you see
I
the
know a school,
S1 selections?
Yes, I know a school that is government aided, but also charges a lot
The
of
one on
money.
Entebbe Road.
The
one on Entebbe Road, right?
Plus Nsanji, plus all of them, they know themselves,
Yeah.
and which is very unfortunate again, right? And this all happens because of I might be wrong, but I will not spend my time blaming the private sector for what's happening to the education system because education is the mandate of the state. The state must make sure kids are able to actually do school and complete school. So I think we're not trying. Schools must open, but the state has completely shown us that it's incompetent. And if I had it my way, some of you, I would send you to the Bermuda Triangle.
And maybe what you say when it comes to money, I'm more worried for the ages between 3 to 5 that are completely not going to start school. Nurseries were scraped. But it speaks to the reality of then what does our curriculum look like for the children that are going back to school? Is it business as usual? Does it incorporate post-COVID, narrative?
Do we have an accelerated curriculum? And where is it?
Exactly.
Yes.
So before the advent of the pandemic, we were trying to revise our curriculum. We did do something about it. But now we have a different conversation that should be happening post-COVID, because I don't think after 2 years, this child is going to remember what you were teaching. And even if they did, I don't think the time that we've spent on Zoom and online classes, children I don't think they've really been grasping what has been happening, because it's been in between my cartoons, in between sleeping, in between all these other things. Home
collecting firewood,
really is not.
Water.
Some are even collecting firewood and water. Yes. Others have gone into child labor, so they're busy making money. So what does school look like for them after this? It could be skilling. It couldn't be 1 + 1 again.
But but again, this conversation on education is quite depressing, because it's not like the state or the institution that runs education is devoid of experts to even speak to. I was having conversations with Benjamin Rukwenje of Boundless Minds, and they've been doing amazing work. Even before COVID, they were doing amazing work on technology with small groups of people. Look at Fundi Bots, Look at even Arinaitwe Rugendo has, and so there's a lot of initiatives. And this could have been the opportunity for scale up. This could have been the opportunity for government to invest into some of these initiatives, but also to say that how do we make this space lucrative so that it buffers the damage that the education sector has taken in. But I don't think that they've even had conversations with these people on how we can work out this education situation.
If they know them, they are ignoring them.
No, but I also think, like Bella, like the idea should never be to like make a sector lucrative, right? Because I think education must never be in any way about lucrative or profit of how much we're spending, right? Because education is the beginning point of livelihood. And when we say education, it's not just about like primary school, because the purpose of education is so that the quality of people's lives improve. That you cannot be very concerned about infrastructure and not be concerned about education. You can't choose one over the other.
They go hand in hand.
Yes, you must invest equally in them, because education has an effect on health.
Yes,
it has an effect on social relations. It has an effect on
income.
It has an
and everything.
Yes.
On population, it has actually been used for the girl child.
I'm starting to think that it is an intentional move, because a certain kind of people are easy to govern. Like if you have a people who are living in so much poverty, they have to debate between whether to be civically engaged or to eat food. I'm going to choose food. You guys, civic engagement is not going to like fill this space in my stomach, right? So me, I've come to a point where I think it's an intentional move, and I might be wrong, but really all the markers are showing this. Because how haven't you opened schools? Like you've opened churches. You could have opened schools, and church things would have happened in the schools if, as a matter of fact,
all my Sunday school children are back to church.
Exactly, right? So I don't know why we're pretending. So for me, it's like, ultimately, I think that government of Uganda and us, because government of Uganda as a collective, whoever wants to feel attacked, let them feel attacked, actually hates the citizens of Uganda. Like for me, that is it. Because if we cared about people, we would have known the things that improve the lives of people and addressed those things. But we have, it's not a lack of knowledge, because they have done benchmarking.
It's not a lack of experts.
It's not a lack of experts. It's just we inherently hate people.
But then also speaks for priorities, because where it is a priority issue.
No, if you hate people,
it's not even about priorities.
If you hate people, you will never prioritize the things that matter. Because if you understand what education has done for you, Tricia Nabaye, and you're Minister of Education, and you know what it has done for your children, you will know, and you desire this upon everybody.
You wouldn't have
and quote
78
scripture
weeks.
on top of that, because the Bible says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do unto yourself. Why is it so hard for you to do that while you're busy quoting the God of Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham? But I'm annoyed, and rightfully so. Yes. Because we have taken lives away from lots and lots of children.
But how do we move on from here? And I know, and that's a very broad question. Because it also comes back to have we thought through this opening, however necessary the opening is? So, for example, how do we deal with the number of girls who have gotten pregnant in the last 2 years? As a country, are we giving up on them? Are they not going to go back to school? Because also remember, a lot of schools are religious owned and run, and we know the attitude of religious leaders towards people who have sex before marriage. They are sinners, and so they're not going to be allowed back into school. And so how do we deal with a generation of young girls who cannot go back to school?
I think we've not planned that far. And even if we were looking for January, I really don't think our Ministry of Education has planned that far. Most probably, they have not even seen how we are opening these schools. Because if we are speaking to issues of 18-year-olds need to be vaccinated, how are we going to execute that if the general public has failed to be,
Also assuming that the people going to school are 18 years. You see, like,
assuming that the children going to school are 18 years as well. And then we have 2 classes in there that I don't know how they're going to study. I mean, you have 2 people going into candidate classes. How are they going to maneuver that?
Are we going to have
the S1s who were in S1 and then the S1s are
joining?
There are even 3 lots because you've done 2 years.
So I don't think we have a plan, because if we had a plan, it would be in motion as we speak. You cannot say that you're going to open in January and
And we still have no plan.
and still sit still and wait for January to show up, then you're like, oh, now that it's January, we are going to begin. No, it should be a plan in motion that now that we're going to open in January, what are we doing for, the candidate classes that are there? What are we doing for the ones that are waiting? I don't know how to even explain
How
it.
about the ones who
doesn't
became
make
farmers?
sense anymore. And then we have the ones who became farmers, the ones who are mothers.
I don't know what is happening.
The ones, how are we going to add them? So that is why I say, I don't think we have a plan. Because if we had a plan, it would be in motion. For the past 6 months, we would be seeing an advent towards, the reopening. But also, it's also shaming that the whole region is busy and we have ourselves in this moment with no plan. I mean, everyone, we are headlines in other countries.
Are we complacent as a people?
Yeah,
because look at the aspect of school management committees. I don't know, sijui PTA, sijui PTAs. Shouldn't that have been the place where we would begin to see the rise of organic social movements demanding for minimum standards on school opening? Because I'm wondering, where is the voice of parents? Because
why are they not
none of us, okay.
Yes.
We have children we are taking care of. We have children. But how come none of us has a community of parents that is as angry as us? Because how are we taking our children back into a space we cannot even account for?
And why aren't you even asking for it? I mean, 2 years later, why aren't parents, storming State House to tell the Minister of Education, please open schools. Anyway.
Yes. Anyway, no, I think for me, it's one, I think, yes, we're very complacent, but also we somehow, each of us sits and like, Tricia will do it. Tricia thinks Isabella will do it. Isabella thinks Maria will do it. Maria is waiting for Tricia to do it, right? Yes. Two, I think also we live in a country of deeply fatigued people. I keep telling people that I think it's completely difficult for us to have to, like, someone shouldn't have to be like the Jesus of sacrificing themselves on this hill, because we understand that in a country like Uganda, when you protest, when you speak out on anything, you're going to be written as, yes, subversive actors, and there's been a decline in drones, but listen, they can always come back and pick you up, right?
I think they just packed somewhere.
Yes, but for me, it's at the risk of imagining that there are people who actually care for this country and are trying to do their best to ensure that kids go back to school, I will say things. I think data is very important for us to be able to curate responsive forms of education for all the diverse groups of young people who have been affected differently. Because it's not just COVID, the pandemic and things like that. It's the fact that there is insecurity right now in Karamoja. How are kids in Kabong supposed to go back to school, right? We have incidences of prolonged hunger. You have flooding. Like, there's lots and lots of things, on top of the fact that people are still dying of other diseases apart from COVID-19. So I think for me, it is, how do we curate? How do we use the, I can't believe I'm going to use this example, right? How do we use the local government systems to ensure that everybody is taken care of? On the matter of religious issues, I really think I've come to a point in my life where I think God should leave Uganda. And God should leave every other country that exists in poverty, because one of the most religious countries in the world are also the lowest on human development indicators. Like, how much does God hate you that you must spend all the time praying to him and not fixing things, right? And yet half of these things just require human wisdom. Like the same pastors who are going to accuse young children of having sex without acknowledging that this is rape will never put the same amount of energy to addressing rape issues, right? They're just there on immorality. Like me, I'm tired all the time, right? So and for me, like, we must get to a point where we actually care for people. That's why I'll tell people, like, ultimately we hate people, especially we hate people who do not belong to our social class, because the people who are actually suffering are people whose children cannot afford to go to certain kinds of school. True. Yes, I sit on this panel, like you said, we all take your poll. Like, my siblings have been able to go to school, in all honesty, right? Because online classes, I can afford to pay for certain things here and there and stuff like that. Even me, like, I feel the pinch of it, right? But ultimately, until we, in the words of Mpanga, David, right, who said that until we start feeling like everybody is paying, then we will never be able to create the country that we want to create. So for me, I'm hoping that government officials listen.
It's a hope.
If you feel like
You
you
know
can't
what?
do
They're
your
not going
job,
to
right? If
listen,
you feel like you
but
can't do your
It's
job,
a
you
hope.
resign.
But I've also noticed that I'm a believer in alternatives.
Mm.
If I have an alternative, it will speak to what I want.
Yes, I think Uganda should create a parallel
So
government
yes,
system.
so homeschooling, please, if you can afford it, and if you can, get
But
together.
that's a very no. But you see, Tricia, I'm going to call you out because that's a very class-centered answer.
Let me finish
Because how
my
does a woman?
argument.
No, it's a very privileged.
very
Because how does
privileged.
a woman
Yeah,
in the
proposal.
market teach their child? Because these women
You
have to
teach
carry
them
their
the
children.
regular skills.
But you see,
No,
that
because, but here's the thing: the people who can get their kids into homeschool, the
are
people
also
who
rich
can,
people.
the people who can have their kids access online class, belong to a certain class.
And they are friends
The
with the
Bellas.
people who have killed the entire education
And that's probably
system.
But
the
we've
most
agreed,
silent class.
that not everyone is going to get the same education that you want people to get.
They must be able to, Tricia. That's the point
Education
we're
is supposed to
having.
be an
That you see,
equalizer.
how
It should
is
equalize
a person,
society.
how is a woman who has, because illiteracy levels are highest among women living in rural areas.
Yes.
What is that woman supposed to teach their child? A skill that is going to sustain them in the world to come. Joking, like the world to come is not the world we are seeing now.
Yes.
Even us here, we are not
seeing it. Yes.
We are not tech savvy enough to fit into the world that comes.
Exactly.
So no,
But
Tricia.
because let me tell you this, the truth is there are children that are seated and they don't even know what the future looks like.
Yes.
But I know that within their communities, there are things they can learn that could help them. I'm telling you the truth.
For example?
Not every child. For example, they can be, taught how to make money using what? Papyrus. Papyrus is there. You can now learn to create skills that make you money. I know there are children,
Which
but
money?
these
I know,
skills.
Shami, I'm going to push you to the edge.
Okay,
Which
please
money do you make from papyrus? I come from a society where we use papyrus either as mats or as fencing.
Beds.
There is no
And
money
beds.
in that thing. Let me tell
There's
you
no
the
money in
truth.
that thing.
It's not
Everyone
there,
walks
right?
to a swamp.
Because you're going
But
to
also, you're going to get us into the conversation on climate change.
Yeah, no,
That's
but you
true.
see, ultimately, Tricia, the thing is, the state has the responsibility. Unless we are creating a counter government, right? Unless we are creating a completely counter system,
The problem with the
which
counter system
requires a class suicide.
Yes.
We cannot ask people to homeschool children because these kids know the things that happen in their community. They know how to lay bricks. They know this is what they've been doing.
They're already harvesting papyrus.
Yes, they are selling mangoes
They
and tomatoes
make money
and
at the end of the day after
so
that.
no, there's no solution that involves us to do homeschool.
What
Where the homeschool was a concept started by rich white women, but
we'll go there another day.
Yes,
So anyway,
but also, if we're to talk about class suicide, maybe even as we conclude this show, the question is: do we understand the class suicide sacrifice and what it takes for us to ultimately die to a class so that we can be able to have an alternative government as a people?
Yes,
because that's probably
I don't think we do.
That's probably
I don't think we do.
the most reasonable direction to go to. But do we understand? Are we willing to pay the price and die?
Yes.
So
I think a
yes.
great conversation that could help us have like an honest discussion about class suicide is really the conversation on climate change, and I think we should talk about it next week, right? But I don't think we fully understand. Like, we know it as a concept, but class suicide includes things like how much land are you willing to own as an individual in a country of 44 million people, 200,000 plus square miles. If you own more than 15 acres of land, or even up to 15 acres of land, you actually don't belong to a certain social class.
True.
Yes, because land is a very important aspect in a very agrarian society of ours.
Yes.
Our consumer habits are very important to think about. Like, there's so much for us to think about if we're going to have those, including manels.
Even the means of production.
Because all of us are factors of production. We are labor, we are not people.
I know. And we are out of time, but I know that one of the conversations we had wanted to have was a conversation on climate change, and we also had wanted to have a conversation around our local governments that want to earn as much money
as
MPs. Please roll your eyes and let them fall over. But we will defer the conversation on climate change to next week because it's still an active discussion that is happening. For those of us who haven't yet listened, please take time and listen to the Prime Minister of Barbados. She's
called Mia.
She had an amazing submission around climate change, but also around the inequalities that are beginning to emerge from that. That's another inequality, earthquake that we are waiting for us to. I mean that is about to erupt on us. And so take time to understand climate change, take time to listen to one or two conversations that are happening on this subject, because if you can access data and watch this show on YouTube, you definitely can access any of the conversations that are happening around the world on climate change. Otherwise, from us to you, thank you very much for having joined us once again on the Women's Show. And yes, have yourselves a lovely, lovely week. In case there is something that you would like us to talk about, do not hesitate to get in touch with the media team, and we will be able to feature that in. Our Tricia, Maria, thank you very much for joining us on this panel, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.